Social media managers and contracts. Now, there are a lot of things that go into contracts. It can be overwhelming, it can seem scary, and there are a lot of things that go overlooked in contracts that can cost you money, and a lot of it. So in today's video, I am addressing the things you need in your contract as a social media manager. Now, I do want to add a disclaimer that by no means am I a lawyer. Surprise. But I do run a multi-six-figure social media agency, and this video is completely based on my experience and things that you do want to include. Now, by the end of this video, you should have a really good idea of what you need to include in your contracts. And if you stay all the way till the end, I will provide a resource for you where you can take the next steps and find custom contracts for your social media business. So let's dive in. So the very first thing you must absolutely include in your contracts is your scope of work. Now, this might seem obvious, but there are a lot of mistakes that happen when writing down your scope of work in a contract. Now, why is this so important? Because you want to describe what you will be doing for a client as well as what you won't be doing. So this way it's very clear what is included in your scope of work and what isn't. So for easy reference, you will put this down in your contract. So let's say scope creep is very common for clients in the social media world. So let's say a client asked you to do a task that doesn't fall under your social media scope. You can refer back to the contract and say, hey, this does not fall under our scope of work, but if you would like us to conduct X, Y, and Z, it will cost you this much, right? You can have a fee, an extra cost that they would have to make if they wanted you to perform these tasks. So you want to get very, very clear on what you do and leave nothing up for guessing, right? You need to be very clear in this contract on what you will do. So for example, instead of saying we create 4 posts a month, 4 posts a week, you want to even write down what kind of post. Let's say, are we talking Instagram? Is that 4 in-feed posts? Is it 4 story posts? Is it 4 videos? Is it not? Because this is all gonna matter. Like if you are creating 4 videos a week rather than 4 graphics or photos a week, it makes a huge difference in your time, right? So you want to be sure to be super clear on your scope of work, on the things you do, and state very clearly what you don't do. Now, if you're a social media manager that's still looking for clients, then make sure you check out my other video where I share how you can gain social media management clients with absolutely no experience. Now, the second thing you absolutely want to include in your contracts as a social media manager is a good faith clause. Now, what is a good faith clause? Very simply put, it's a clause that states that both parties will uphold their responsibility in the agreement. Now, if this is not the case, let's say a client does not uphold their side of the agreement and partnership, then you would not have to uphold your part of the agreement and partnership. Now, why is this so important? I'm going to give you an example. Let's say you run into a client, you sign a client that is not willing to work with you, is not willing to give you revisions, they're not willing to go through your procedure and do their end of the agreement, then that way you wouldn't have to finish your scope of work, because again, it's a partnership, a collaboration. And while we hope this never ever happens, from experience speaking, this does happen in some cases. So it's definitely something you want to include in your contracts to protect yourself, your team, and your business. If you're a social media manager looking to hit those 6 figures in business, then make sure you grab my free guide, The Roadmap to Becoming a 6-Figure Social Media Manager. The third thing you absolutely want to include in your contract are your termination notice. So how far in advance would a client have to let you know and give you a notice if they wanted to end services? This is very important because especially as social media managers, we often work ahead. We often create content a month, weeks in advance for clients. And so if a client ends the contract with us or terminates the contract or services, then you want to make sure you're compensated for the work that you've already performed. So usually it's very common to have a 30-day notice if someone wants to to terminate services, and that is after a minimum period of time, right? So for example, for my business, my multi-six-figure agency specifically, we do 6-month contracts, and if clients do want to cancel the contract after, we do need a 30 to 60 days notice, especially since we do work a month ahead, and it protects you financially. So you wouldn't want someone to end services a week or 2 weeks before the contract ends, because then you have no room or no cushion to find your next client and to fill that financial gap. So I 100% advise to at least have like a 30-day notice in there. Sometimes it's even 60 days, but you have to set this for yourself, but make sure it's very clear and that you are aware of the notice time period. Now, the fourth thing you absolutely want to include in your contracts as a social media manager are late payment fees, okay? We always recommend people to be on auto bill, to have their credit card authorization form on file and records, but it may still happen that a client's payment doesn't go through and gets rejected. And of course, we always have the late payers. So in order to provide a sense of accountability for a client, you can include late payment fees in your contract. So for example, for every day a client pays late, there would be a fee that will be added to their invoice. Again, this is important because that way you hold them accountable. It's more likely for them to pay on time. But again, I would always still recommend for you to have some sort of auto payment on file, especially for a service like social media management, because it's ongoing and it would really disrupt momentum if you would have to pause services because the client is not paying. And on top of that, the last thing you want to do is chase clients for payment. So again, I highly recommend for you to have this in your contracts. Now, these wrap up the 4 things that I would totally include in my contracts as a social media manager. Again, this is completely based on my experience and clauses that I've seen social media managers often get wrong, and it can cost them money, okay? So this is very important. Now, if you're looking for a good contract, then I have put a link in the description below where you can find and buy contracts based on your industry, which for us would be marketing, social media managers. And those contracts are templatized so you can adjust them based on your terms, and they are written by a legal firm. So highly recommend you to purchase those. Again, it does depend where you're located, whether you're in the US or overseas, and from state to state, your laws will vary, but it's a great starting point for you to have proper contracts in place. Now, I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you comment if you enjoyed this video, share with your friends, and subscribe so you don't miss any of my next video.